a property will have a retaining wall and maybe even a sunken area. Now, when I think about a retaining wall, I'm thinking of not a garden landscape wall. I'm thinking about a wall that's holding back massive amounts of soil or holding back portions of a parking lot or being used in a structural nature. There are a lot of different types of retaining walls. In our particular case, the retaining wall that we're looking at today is a poured in place concrete retaining wall. Now, one of the principles of construction that you need to probably identify immediately is that old plumb, level, square, and straight. Plumb, is it the state of verticality? And that's looking down the entire wall and making sure it's plumb. Straight, is it straight or is it all wavy? It's one thing being wavy by design. It's another thing being wavy because it's moved. And then the last, square and level, would be an identification from looking at it from a distance, which we're going to look at in a moment. Now, when I'm looking at this massive wall, I think, what is it holding behind us? Well, in our particular case, this wall is holding up a tremendous amount of earth and drainage. Well, if anybody's ever overwatered a potted plant that does not have drainage, you'll drown your plant. So in our particular case, we got to look at across the bottom of this huge retaining wall, drainage points. In our particular case, about every 8 to 10 foot, I've got a piece of PVC set up to dewater the back of this retaining wall. Now let's talk a little bit about its construction. This retaining wall was constructed using a form. That form was like a sandwich cookie, and you pour the concrete between it. And so each one of these little holes is where a form tie sat through and held those forms in place. So each one of those little holes is a potential spot to develop a leak. So I'm going to look through this wall and see if I have that. Now, when I think about concrete, because that's the construction of this wall, I think of how it was constructed. We know that concrete is made with Portland cement, small aggregate, large aggregate, and enough hydration to make it moist. Well, our challenge is concrete creates an exothermic reaction. It creates heat as it cures. It takes 28 days to cure concrete. So during those first 28 days of curing is when the majority of the cracks are going to occur. And so I can see some of these cracks that are going vertically up and down the wall. Now, identifying cracks. That's a real key element to a commercial property inspector, maybe to any inspector, because that helps us identify displacement or movement is by doing some crack identification. So when I look at a crack, I can think of 3 different types of cracks we can have present. Vertical crack, horizontal crack, or diagonal stair-stepping crack. So when I think of a vertical crack, an up and down crack, I like to take a look at that crack to see if it shows me any evidence of movement. Evidence of movement to me would be, when I look at this crack, is it wider at the top than it is at the bottom? That means the wall is differentially moving. Is it wider at the bottom than it is at the top? That means it's kind of heaving up. So that tells me that. When I look at the cracks in this building, I don't see any evidential movement signs. That's a great thing. So a crack is just a crack. Concrete cracks. So I don't want to see settlement cracks. That would be that differential movement. But I'll tell you the crack I do not want to see. And that's a horizontal crack. See, a horizontal crack would mean I've got a crack that could potentially collapse this wall. There's pressure being placed on the opposite side pushing this wall in this way. So there's two ways we're going to look at this wall. One, through this short look as we're doing right now. We'll call that the micro look. We just did that. The next, I'm going to look at this wall. We're going to walk back about 50 paces, and we're going to look at the macro look at this wall. So bear with me while we walk over here and look at this wall from another angle. Our macro is a wider gaze. You could do these in any order, macro to micro or micro to macro. I'm going to do the micro, then the macro. The macro is helping us frame our level. So you see how I can see every one of these 5 stair steps and how that level is across the whole stair step. From the macro, I can see all of the myriad of cracking that we have. There's a crack, there's a crack, there's a crack, there's a crack, there's a crack. I see all the cracking. But it was that micro that gave me the interpretation that that cracking is not movement. So it's important. You might think, oh, it's a retaining wall. It's up. We're good. Checkbox. Remember, there's a certain few other steps you need to do. Micro and macro look at the wall, plumb, level, square, and straight with this much wall, drainage, and then lastly, taking an identification and look at any cracking that might be present. Because in our case, from here, we can see all the cracking, but it's not providing us a significant amount, if any, structural loss. And that's what your client needs to know. We finished the retaining wall, but we're not done with all of those protected areas. Where the retaining wall was protecting that area from just that huge elevation change, I kind of got a retaining wall right here to my left. And this sunken area that we have is actually the part of the means of egress or the exit path for this lower area of the building. So in other words, in the event of an emergency, when people leave through this door, they need to go out and then up these stairs. Now, again, we are not authorities having jurisdiction. We are not code enforcement officers. So we're just going to talk about this building as it sits today. But remember, the same rules apply to any set of stairs, to any area of a building, as they do inside or outside. What I mean by that is, if you recall, every 12 foot of rise, I need to have a landing. So I am not going to pull out a tape measure and measure, is this depth 12 foot or greater? Because if it is greater, there should have been an intermediate landing right here. That's not going to be our call. So for me to take on my inspection report and take a photo of the stairs and with a comment saying, be aware, the stairs may have required a landing under modern construction principles, that's all you need to do. But I'm concerned with drainage. We talked about on retaining walls having drainage on the wall portion. Well, what happens when it rains or it snows or anything else here? Is this going to be another swimming pool? Or is the water going to go under the doors? Or in our case, go to this slot drain? So in my inspection, again, photo document the slot drain, look to see if I have any debris. I'm not going to pull the drain up, but that's what I'm going to look for. And then as I migrate up the stairs, we're going to look for trip hazards. A trip hazard would be uneven stairs. We're going to make sure that we have hand railings. That hand railing needs to extend beyond the bottom tread at least 12 inches. In this case, it has. Is the hand railing graspable? Is it continuous? Yes, 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 yes. And technically, it should be returned to the wall. Now, in our particular case, it's returned down. So it does not have a hook point. So if I had a bag on my hip, or if I had something that could grab this, this is not a hook point for me because it is wrapped down. So we do have that. So I will walk the stairs, make sure my treads are all at least 11 inches, make sure my risers are between 4 and 7. So all of those are intact. I'm going to look for any structural damage. Structural damage could be in the concrete, could be in the anti-skid of the tread. But it's important as you do your commercial property inspections to walk through the entire property, to look at the entire building, to think about areas like this that are going to catch water, or retaining walls that are holding back earth. Are they all going to be able to be drained? The CommStop helps you with all of that, as well as photo documenting all of your deficiencies. So follow the CommStop where you can, and by all means, hold on to hand railings and stay safe during your inspections. As we conclude this sunken area in any of these areas, I want to end with talking about edge protection. Edge protection is this railing that's right here. Whenever we have a drop greater than 30 inches is where we need edge protection. And this sunken area, the area over the top of a retaining wall, all of these require this edge protection to be present. And so I'm going to make sure that I have it. It's secure. I don't have any openings greater than a 4-inch sphere. And I'm going to make sure it's solid that can withstand at least 200 pounds of lateral pressure. So take your time. Walk through all these systems. Identify those safety defects, the missing hand railings, the ungraspable hand railings, poor drainage, as well as stair construction. The CommStop is there to bridge that gap, help you through this entire process. But you can only do that if you take your time and walk through every element of these commercial buildings, because we're going to have retaining walls and sunken areas and stairs and vertical transportation throughout the entire building, both inside and outside. So use that CommStop and stay safe.